All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a book club session. Today's topic is a little different and a little difficult to tackle as well, because we'll be discussing suicide in literature, uh, not depression or mental illness, very specifically suicide. I have a very particular reason I picked out this topic for today's session. But if this is your first session within Heli's book club, because I know that a few of you have joined just recently, hello, I am Heli. I love reading books, and this book club is basically my accountability project to read more. So, as much as I want you to enjoy reading with all of us, it's more of a thing that I do to keep myself sane because I have a very ambitious career, but if I don't read, I feel like I'm not in my body, I'm not in my soul. I feel very disconnected from myself when I don't read. And lately, I think I have done a bunch of reading which discuss the themes of suicide. Very strangely, this was a book that I picked up on my birthday from a bookstore physically just by reading the last page. Then I realized it is actually longlisted for the International Booker Prize this year. I don't think it was selected. And then I realized it's a book which deals with the suicide of a twin, right? It's a very specific topic, but also something that I would have never thought about before, never thought about reading before. My voice is properly audible, right? Let me know if my audio is not clear by any chance. I also got this book, which is this is not a suicide note. It's actually notes on suicide, which is just a detached commentary on the act of suicide, right? And it's not something very depressing. So a lot of times when people come over to my place and they see all these books, they feel like something's wrong with me. But I'm just trying to have an understanding of this through literature. And I think this book club session is so that I can actually do it collectively with all of you and get your opinions as well. And yes, now going to the personal, why did I choose this topic very particularly this month? Okay. A very close friend of mine from school, he was a pretty nice guy. I had known him in school. Of course, were not very connected after school, just as it happens. He had gotten married in February of this year. I think that must be like 4 months ago. And I went to a cafe in June, and the barista at that cafe is one of my school friends. And we always say hello. And I specifically choose that cafe to go to because the barista is my school friend. And she told me, you remember this guy? I said, yeah, of course I remember him. We're friends. He said, he committed suicide. And my jaw just dropped because we were very close in school. He was definitely one of my closest friends in school. He had just gotten married. And of course, I'm 25, so not a lot of our friends are married. So we, of course, knew he's married. He also married his school love of 12 years. Okay. Something that very few people are able to do. They were in a relationship for maybe more than 10 years. And this is within 4 months of a marriage. Now, what drove him to this is not my concern to discuss here, none of my business, but it definitely triggered a lot of feelings in me, right? And I think at that point, I went through a lot of emotions, right? There was one phase where could he have reached out to me? Probably not. We were not in touch for a very long time. Okay. Were there other people? Yes, of course. He had just gotten married, for fuck's sake. Just gotten married. I'm sure he had a wife. He actually had everything from what it looked like, right? He was finally at a stage of his life that he would be happy. But still, this. And it triggered a lot of feelings. Okay. It triggered a lot of feelings. And I don't think any book could capture my feelings more than this one because it's, again, essays on the subject. Suicide then finds us both strangely reticent and unusually loquacious. Explain. Lost for words and full of them. I don't think any sentence or any words can capture the feelings you feel when you hear that somebody has done this. Okay. Has this happened to any of you? Okay. Any close acquaintance, anyone you knew, and you would hear something like this and you'd just go into an utter state of shock. Of course, you want to understand, but then you also know it's not your place to understand. And then you have so many questions, but you also have no one to ask. And if it's someone close, God forbid, because it's happened to me during COVID, somebody I was really close to committed suicide, and it definitely affected me in a very, very negative way. I had to take therapy for a year. Yeah, absolutely. That happens. And even I studied in a very good college, and the girl who was the general secretary in my year of college, she also committed suicide just a couple of years back. So what, 23 maybe, right? And a lot of times, I'm very thankful for you if you've not felt it before, because it's extremely painful. And the closer you are, the more painful it is, and it's something that you'll never move on from entirely, and that's something that you have to accept, which is what a book like Norwegian Wood deals with. Okay, so I think I'd like to start the session now by asking a question that a lot of people ask me when I tell them that I'm reading a book and it's about suicide. Okay, does literature encourage suicide? Does literature encourage you to do this? Absolutely not. Okay. Now it totally depends on the reader. Okay. Depends on the reader's state of mind. But I don't think that there's any book that actively encourages someone to kill themselves. Okay. If anything, the reason I read these books is to confront the feelings that I do not have words for yet, is to confront the lives that I will never live, and to have a deeper understanding of people. Because what is humanity if not the attempt to understand and love each other? Okay. So, in this entire session that I'm going to host, please do not take anything that I'm saying as an encouragement of the act. Not at all. We're just trying to understand things, understand the books that have been written. But if anybody is in the session today who is going through a hard time, please see a professional. I can assure you, you are going to life transforms, right? And I think that's one of the best things about the book Veronica Decides to Die. But we'll talk about the books in order eventually. But I think I have also felt a lot of dark feelings at one point, very specifically somewhere around last year, where I was extremely isolated, living alone. And I also had a leg injury because of which I could not really move around much. So my life went from traveling a lot, taking flights, going out there to work, networking physically, to not even being able to go to the washroom on my own. And that was extremely, extremely depressing. I cannot emphasize on the feelings that I felt in those days. And I was prescribed some antidepressants, but within 2 weeks, I stopped taking them because it was not working out well for me. I felt like I'll get worse. Eventually, I did get better, and I'm happiest right now. Right, there's nothing I'm chasing anymore. But it's definitely a feeling that is very hard to deal with, and people who have not felt it can never relate to it. Okay, and have you guys read Virginia Woolf's works or Virginia Woolf's letters? Has anyone here already read uh, Virginia Woolf's works or Virginia Woolf's letters? Very specifically, her suicide note. Absolutely. So when I was in college, right, let's start the session by, since literature also includes Virginia Woolf's suicide note. Okay. Um, I'll share my screen with you guys. This was Virginia Woolf's suicide note. Okay. And if you can read it sometime, that would be great. Okay. And when I was in college, I had still no, I was still happy in life. I had still not known excruciating pain yet. I was in my first year of college. Okay. Um, there was a teacher who introduced us to this letter. Okay. Of course, we are literature students and we had to read some Virginia Woolf's works. And in this letter, she told us how Virginia Woolf wrote that although she's very happy with her husband and her husband couldn't have done better, she cannot keep going on like this. And she doesn't want to spoil his life anymore. And I really like the last sentence. I don't think two people could have been happier than we have been. Okay. And at that point, our professor said something that didn't make sense to me on that very day. She said, what do people think? Is that all we need? A good husband, a good career? Because Virginia Woolf was very successful in her career as well. A good network of friends, family, and we don't have any reason to feel sad or depressed. And I was like, yes, of course, that's all you need. Okay, I was very young. I had not felt the multitudes of emotions that I have felt. Okay, and I'm pretty sure everyone can relate, right? When you are young, you cannot really understand all of this. You cannot really understand why would possibly anyone do anything like this when there's so much ice cream. And the joys of our life are so simple. Okay, this is so easy. Life feels so easy. It's just as you grow older, you understand a lot more things. But as I grew older, there was one day in my life where everything in this letter made so much sense to me. It fucking felt like I could have written it myself and it would to make total sense. Okay. Am I at that stage now? No, not at all. But that's what literature does. It gives you a sense of understanding when no one else does. Okay. Case in point, let's talk about the bell jar. Okay, let's get into the very first book we're going to talk about today, the bell jar. Bell jar is a book by Sylvia Plath. It's not too big, so even if you're a beginner to reading, you will probably still enjoy reading the bell jar. Sylvia Plath, shortly after the publication of the bell jar, actually put her head in an oven and killed herself. And shockingly, Nicholas, who was her son, who was with her at that time, he was very young, when he grew older, he also killed himself the same way. And that's something really morbid to get to know about. But even at that, if you see any reviews of the bell jar online, or there's a very good YouTube video on bell jar by TED Education, you'd see that a lot of people say that this book saved me. Okay. So nowhere in these books is the agenda to encourage people to follow the footsteps of the writer, not at all. Okay. But give people a sense of understanding that we constantly feel that we lack. Okay. In all the books we'll discuss, in all the literature about suicide in general, you'd see six very common themes: mental illness and despair, obviously. Okay. But the second one is isolation and alienation, that feeling that no one understands me, no one gets what it is to be me. And after one point, you just don't want to explain yourself to anyone. You don't want the arguments, you don't want the fights, you don't want the conflict. You just want to quietly leave. Okay. So, uh, in literature, especially Belza, a lot of people have found solace and comfort that, okay, finally, the things I'm feeling, somebody has written about it. So maybe I'm not alone. Okay. So in this book, there's the main character whose name is Esther, which is basically like Sylvia Plath writing about herself. Okay. Now, what is the bell jar? Bell jar is actually a metaphorical symbol. Okay. Like she feels that depression is like a bell jar and she feels trapped under it. Okay. So the imagery of the bell jar means that feeling of being isolated in your suffering and there's no way out of it. Okay. It starts exactly how Sylvia Plath's life was at that point. Okay. Uh, it's a night says that while talking about suicide, the language we use is very different. Act to be committed. Okay, illegal. Died by suicide. Okay, that's something interesting. Thank you very much. I'll try to change that, although it may not be possible in today itself, but that's definitely something insightful. Please keep sharing your opinions, guys. I would love to see what you have to say because we have touched upon such a sensitive topic today. Um, okay. Now, uh, there's also a very popular uh, symbol from the book The Bell Jar, which is the symbol of the fig tree. Okay. And basically, the imagery means something like Esther or Sylvia in this scenario as well. They're paralyzed by the thing that they have only one choice to make. You can either be this or that, choose this husband or that husband, be here or there. You know, when you have so many options and you cannot choose everything, she feels very crippled by that. What if life was like clothes? You could change your clothes and see which fits best. What if you could choose your life like that? Okay. And because she's so crippled by that feeling of not being able to decide right or make the right choice, she feels like she will be stagnant. Okay. And this is a quote I'm reading out. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children. Another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G. I'm not reading everything. I saw myself sitting on the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. Now, that's a very depressing way to put the paradox of choices. You have so many choices in life, but at a given point, you can only make a finite number of choices. Okay. There's another quote I really, really like from the bell jar. I listen to the beat of my heart. I am, I am, I am. It's a very, very popular quote from this book, I think. And it makes me feel very, very good. Okay, I quoted it from memory. I didn't write it down for some reason. So if I made a mistake in the quote, just rectify me. But yeah, Belja is definitely a book that you would really, really like to read if you have felt these feelings or you want to get an understanding of these feelings, because unless you read, you would probably not know this. Um, a lot of times, what we see is that in such books, shortly after writing such very depressing books, uh, the writers die by suicide as well. Okay, I think I got you there, Shilpi. Uh, but when I read Notes on Suicide, I really liked how Simon Critchley writes. This book is not a suicide note. 10 days after Edward Levy handed in the manuscript of Suicide to his publisher, he hanged himself. 2 years after Jean Amery's On Suicide was published, the author took an overdose of sleeping pills. In 1960, some 18 years after Albert Camus had raised, and so he thought, resolved the question of suicide in the myth of Sisyphus, he was killed in a car accident. Let me say at the outset, at the risk of disappointing the reader, I have no plans to kill myself just yet. But this book is basically like a meditation on the act and not anything depressing at all. So I feel like if you want to read about suicide from a analytical point of view, this is going to be a very good book. I really, really enjoyed reading this. And the next book we're going to discuss is Haruki Murakami's book, Norwegian Wood. But before we go there, there's something that caught my attention in this book is how a lot of times uh, this act of dying by suicide comes from a place of a loss of love. Okay, a lot of times the feeling of not having anyone in this world, not having anyone for companionship, right? The desire for companionship becomes so strong. And oh, again, one of the oldest books on these feelings would probably be Sorrows of Young Werther. And I have not picked it up because I've not read the original text myself. But it definitely outlines the feelings of the writer, feeling a lot of depressing feelings because the person he loves doesn't requite their feelings. Okay, it's about unrequited love and you're not being able to let go. And there's a chapter in this book about suicide notes, and I'd like to capture this. One always speaks to someone in a suicide note. Suicide notes are attempts at communication. They are a last and usually desperate attempt to communicate, final communications. They are also failed attempts in the sense that the writer is communicating a failure to communicate, expressing the desire to give up in one last attempt at expression. The suicidal person doesn't want to die alone, but wants to die with another or others to whom the note is addressed. And this chapter itself, I think, also talked about, it talks about Kurt Cobain's suicide. So if anyone are familiar with that, you might like this chapter very specifically. There was also another part I really liked. I hope that I can find it quickly. Otherwise, I'll take it to the end of the session. No, I cannot find it. I think I definitely underlined it, but basically it talked about revenge suicides. Like a lot of times, people feel so much pain after loss of love that they want to leave the person who has hurt them that much with a lifelong feeling of pain that look what you did to me. And yeah, that was absolutely very, very disturbing to read about. I think we read a lot about it when we are young, especially like where I came from. I think it was kind of, now that I'm older, it's kind of funny, but it was quite funny how um, sometimes when like these teenagers, couples, they would have these fights and the guys would be like, oh, I'll die for you. And even girls, right? They'd be like, I'll die for you if you leave me and all of those things. So definitely that shakes a lot of feelings. And I do not think, thankfully, nothing like that happened in our school days, but boy, did we hear a lot about it in those days. Um, I also feel like there's a lot of times when these are also attempts at attention in some way. Not that it's a bad thing. A lot of times that attention is very much needed. Maybe they're not feeling heard, they're not feeling seen. It reminds me of the time when I was in school, and there was this particular classmate we had who was quite suicidal in her outlook. It was extremely scary sometimes to be around her. And I'm hoping she got the help that she needed. She's doing well in life. She's studying law, as far as I know. Um, but she would often sit alone in the class, and she would, I'm not sure if I'll be able to put this up on YouTube, but she would put glass panels from the windows to her wrists. And we would get extremely scared. I remember this one time we had to call a teacher because we were extremely scared what she's up to. Um, and a lot of times the narrative that becomes in that teenage group is, okay, this person is very attention seeking. Okay, this person is very, I remember the narrative around that person was definitely not a positive one, and definitely not a sympathetic one, because teenagers can be extremely cruel to each other. I think anyone who has been in school can feel that. Please let me know if you can relate to it, but teenagers can be extremely cruel to each other. I don't think there's any other age group that's worse. And this is a feeling that is echoed in the Virgin Suicides, when there's five sisters in Virgin Suicides. Actually, let's go to Virgin Suicides first. There's five sisters, the Lisbon sisters in Virgin Suicide by Jeffrey Eugenides. Okay. And basically, the book is about the collective suicide of five sisters. This is the novel. Okay. And in this story, the story begins with the youngest Lisbon sister, Cecilia, who is only 13 years old. Her attempt at suicide is basically what begins the book. Okay. And she tells the doctor, obviously, doctor, you've never been a 13-year-old girl. Okay. So I'm not sure what kind of pain or what kind of something she's going through in this novel. But definitely, teenage is a very, very difficult period. I think another very good book that captures these feelings is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. I couldn't read this book. I knew that that's a book I should avoid because I knew it will not affect me in a good way, for sure, because it was extremely disturbing to read at the phase of life that I was in. I did not feel comfortable finishing it at all. I didn't. I'm happy about that. But definitely, like, teenage is a very, very brutal period. Okay. And I think there's always this thing that adults really trivialize the pain of youngsters. What could you know about pain? Because, of course, adults have seen much more. What in their vocabulary would be serious worries or serious problems. But at the point, at that outlook, I think everything is very magnified to teenagers. And I feel like teenagers are a phase where we need to extend so much understanding to uh, the children, right? My sister is a teenager right now, my cousin sister. I'm very close to her. And I have always told her that no matter what happens, I am going to be there for you. And you have to know this. And also, teenagers overthink a lot. Okay. They overthink everything. I think with my sister, I gave her a course and she didn't finish the course. Okay. That's all. Now she stopped talking to me entirely. And I was very puzzled. Why is she not speaking to me lately? And she messaged me one day that, I think you absolutely hate me and you never want to see me again because you paid money for a course that I didn't do. He said, not at all. I love you forever. But I don't know what must have gone on in her head that I would hate her for something so trivial. Okay, I would rather she did it. Okay, that course would have benefited her, but it's fine. But her message seeked of so much self loathing, and that also brings me to the question that there's a lot of self-loathing that develops in people over years. Okay, and it doesn't develop in one day, of course. It's some things you hear from parents, probably something you hear from your teacher, something you hear from your friends, something you hear from romantic partners, or rejections from hopeful romantic partners. And uh, yeah, it definitely disturbs someone a lot on the base level, right? And yeah, I just hope that all of you who have teenagers in your family are able to extend that love for them. We were talking about virgin suicides, and in virgin suicides, I think the best uh, way to put virgin suicides is like, there's a certain sort of voyeurism to this act. There's a certain, because the book is written from the point of view from few boys who are enchanted by these girls because they're very beautiful girls who have been close to death, who are almost romanticizing death. Okay. um, and there's a lot of alienation in this book. Okay, the parents of these five girls are very, very harsh on them, which might be one of the reasons why they feel so depressed throughout this book. Okay. One book that I loved a lot, and I will recommend you guys highly, is Veronica Decides to Die. Contrary to the title, it's actually a much more hopeful book. Okay. In this book, there's a central character, Veronica, of course. She is a young Slovenian girl and she has everything in her life, right? But she decides she's going to kill herself. Okay. She the way she logics her life is so nice. The way she logics why she's doing certain things she's gonna do is amazing. Okay, and I'll read one passage out from it, which is gonna be a little long, but I really wanna. And basically, she doesn't like herself anymore. She's not inspired by herself anymore. She's just tired of sticking to societal norms. She doesn't want to go on anymore. She thinks that life is just a repetitive routine. You have to do the same things again and again and again. Exactly. And yep, that's why she decides she's going to end this. Okay. But her attempt fails and she wakes up at an institution called Villette. And the doctor tells her that she only has a few days to live. Okay. He tells her that she's gonna die, but she's gonna die in a few days. Okay. Now this altered reality, knowing that you're gonna die right now and knowing that you're gonna die in 5 days, in these 5 days, she develops a lot of appreciation for life. Okay. By the way, she's not going to die in 5 days. Spoiler alert. Okay. But this entire book is so, so uplifting in confronting the philosophy of what it is to live. And I think a lot of these books actually deal with the question of what does it mean to live. And Shubham, I have literally written in my notes Hemlock Society. Hemlock Society is an amazing Bengali movie that you guys should watch. I loved it, which is similar in the topic. I don't want to say more, but it's amazing. By the way, Parambrata Chatterjee followed me on Instagram, and I'm very, very excited about that. So, yeah, I have been lucky enough to get a like and a follow as well because I made a piece of content that I guess he liked. But yeah, my family is very proud of me. Yay. So, for those of you who don't understand, Parambrata Chatterjee is a Bengali actor, and he's a very, very popular Bengali actor, like lead Bengali actor. Uh, all right. Yeah, of course, there's a lot of YA literature as well that deals with like they both die at the end. I think all the bright places, but I'm not picking them up that much because I wanted to keep the conversation to general literary fiction and not YA very specifically. Also, because YA focuses mostly on youngsters. Um, Talking about youngsters, in this book, what I'd rather not think about, which was the last book I was reading when I decided I want to take this session, is this book about a couple of twins. Okay. And the book is written from the sister's point of view. Her brother decides that he wants to die at 35. And this book basically is a collection of all the memories, feelings, positive, negative, about her brother. Okay. And also the way it captures seeing someone you love slip slowly away from you, but not being able to do anything about it. She's also consulting a therapist in this novel. And a lot of times, the things that the therapist says makes so much sense, right? For example, when she's feeling that her brother is going away from her, and I think that's a feeling a lot of siblings can relate to, right? There's a point in your life you realize that you and your sibling are not that close anymore, and it's definitely painful, but it's definitely more painful for twins, right? And she's trying to get close to him, but he's like shutting down her attempts at communication. Okay. And I think a lot of times what happens, because definitely happened to me when this happened to a friend of mine, is my question was like, why was this person not reaching out? Or why did I not understand? Why was I not there? Okay. Because there's always that feeling that could I have done something? Okay. And similarly, the main character in this is the book. The main character in this book, she wants to connect with him, but the therapist tells her that she cannot connect with someone beyond their will. And she has to, contact is not something that can be forced upon someone. You have to wait for them to accept it. Until then, you can only grieve. There's a lot of understanding that this book deals with. Okay. And, you know, um, one of the quotes this book I personally really liked is I thought about all the love we have inside of us and how only a shred of that reaches the people we actually care about. Another quote that was really nice would be this: I'm trying to understand him. When someone says they love you but still ends up leaving, I can't understand it. I don't believe in that kind of love. This is such a nice way to capture the aftermath of mourning somebody's death. Okay. And also it's also stages of grief, right? Even if you've lost someone in life, I think there's a lot that you can relate to because it's not morbid to read. This book is definitely not morbid to read. Some some books definitely are morbid to read when it comes to such a topic. Okay. Also, there's one book that I absolutely didn't like, which I will tell you to not read because I hated it so much, which is called Love Letters to the Dead. Okay. Similar topic, about letters to people who have died by suicide. But I honestly felt like that book was written just for the shock factor of it or just to use it as an element because there was no sensitivity. There was no, there's such a deep topic that people can do wonders with. But that book was, wow, one hell of a shitty book that I have read in a very long time. So, yeah. Not a good one. Okay. Uh, I also want to recommend a few books that I have not read or read very little of yet, but in my research about books and suicide literature, they were like literally on the top of my searches. In Japan, there's an amazing writer called Yukio Mishima. I've read quite a few books of his. Okay. He actually died by seppuku, which is a Japanese method of a self-inflicted death, but it's not because they want to, like, they're depressed or anything. They do it for their country. They do it for their they do it because they'll stand for something that they want to be remembered for. Okay, I'm forgetting the exact reason for Mishima, but Mishima is very, very, very popular in Japan. He has lots of short stories, and you can read them as well. Okay. Also, Osamu Dazai is no longer human, where the main character feels like uh, he's so repressed, he's not even qualified to be a human anymore. Okay, so that's a good book, and it's also a very short one. Okay, thank you so much for sharing the image, Shuja. So, yeah, I hope that you'll read these books. What else? Which book of apart from these have okay, Dostoevsky's characters are also a very good case study on suicide because a lot of them are contemplating either for or against it, not necessarily like it's not like he condones it nor that he really advocates for it. It's interesting the way he thinks. Like, for example, in Crime and Punishment, his main character is Kolnikov. Even though the idea comes to his head, he is absolutely repulsed by it. And I think there's a lot of uh, religion also that comes into this because in some religions, it is absolutely the worst thing that anyone can do to themselves. Okay. But above all, I think I forgot to touch on Norwegian Wood, which is my favorite book. Okay. Absolutely love this book. Okay. This book opens with three characters: Toru, Naoko, and Kizuki. Okay, they are friends. Naoko is Kizuki's girlfriend in the beginning. Okay, and Kizuki kills himself. And somebody said it so right that depression and this kind of a pain, it never ends with anyone, it just passes on. So the pain, whatever Kizuki was going through, it kind of transfers itself to Naoko. And a spoiler alert now ahead, you can mute me for 2 minutes if you want, if you don't want the spoiler. uh, Throughout the span of the novel, Naoko goes deeper and deeper into a depressive mental state till she also does the same thing. And Toru and Naoko have formed a very strong bond after Kizuki's death. So this also affects Toru. And in the end, Toru receives a call and he doesn't know what that call is. Now, that call is such a symbolic call because it could be a call to join Naoko in a similar state of mind. And maybe Toru is headed towards the same fate. Or maybe the call is a call for coming back to reality. Now it totally depends on what you interpret the call to be as. That's the end, and that's absolutely beautiful. There's I think the best thing about um, this book was the quotes, the sheer number of amazing quotes this book has, because I have so many of my personal favorites from this one. Like there's a scene where they are walking through the woods. Like the woods are a recurrent symbol in this book, which is why the title Norwegian Wood. Um, because the woods basically signify that period in their life where they were together, and then they had this trauma and the childhood and everything that they had in together, especially Naoko and Toru. Kizuki is not a very big part of the novel because he dies in the very beginning. So, but it's more about Toru and the way this affects him. So this was very, very nice. Um, I was reading this paper on suicide memory and trauma in Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood. It's a very nice paper on ResearchGate. If you guys want to read deeply, you can read it. Okay. I'm going to read this from the research paper itself. Death is a recurring event in the novel Norwegian Wood. Upon reading the novel, the readers would feel that Murakami is obsessed with death, more precisely with suicide. Kizuki, Naoko's childhood friend and boyfriend, and Toru's only friend, commits suicide at the age of 17. There's a quote, by the way, this I'm saying. So there's a quote, by the way, from this book that only the dead stay 17 forever. That's a nice sentence. Kizuki's suicide, for no apparent reason, brings an end to the friendship triangle among the three. His death traumatizes Toru and Naoko so deeply that it changes the course of their lives forever. As Toru narrates, until that time, I had understood death as something entirely separate from and independent of life. The hand of death is bound to take us, I had felt, but until the day it reaches out for us, it leaves us alone. This had seemed to me the simple, logical truth. Life is here, death is over there, I am here, and I'm not over there. And that's such a nice, there's one point in your life where you actually finally understand what death really means. And one of the recurrent themes in Norwegian Wood is that death does not exist opposite to life, but rather with life. Okay. The image of yin and yang can be worth considerable to understand the inseparable psychological and emotional connection between Naoko and Kizuki. In yin and yang, without the white counterpart, the black cannot exist. Similarly, Naoko's existence becomes a mere living without Kizuki. So, upon Kizuki's death, Naoko encounters a psychological vacuum that impacts her deeply. This traumatic experience impacts upon her so much that she develops a psychological condition clinically known as PTSD. Kizuki and Naoko's sisters' suicides can be referred to here. I'm not sure if can be referred here. To fill the void, Toru and Naoko develop a less romantic, more habitual relationship. Her obsession with Kizuki and now his absence created a complex in her. And then it goes more into psychological things. But yeah, basically, uh, this is so relatable. Naoko feels guilty at times because she happened to be Kizuki's girlfriend at the time he committed suicide. As why he killed himself remains unknown, but she feels guilty of her ignorance concerning his plans to kill himself. It is not clear from the narrative whether and yes, it is not. It's like he's such a small part of the novel. Like Kizuki is actually a very, very small part of the novel, but his effect you can actually feel through the characters throughout the novel. And I think that makes so much sense because um, when you come across people in life, there's so many people that have impacted them, and you would not really know in what way ever. A book that captures that very well is called The Details by Iya Grenberg. I read it recently. It's not a depressing book at all. It's just about capturing the people in your life and the way they impact you. And I feel like lately I've really been into fiction where nothing really happens. It's just like people going about their lives and um, how that's going for them, what is happening. It's interesting because daily life is not that tantalizing. It's much more simple. Okay. So, yeah, I hope that you like the books that I picked from for the discussion today. Please let me know in the chat with your opinions. I think some of you are discussing Yukio Mishima. Um, some of you have loved Norwegian Wood, so that's great. And please drop your opinions in the chat. And yeah, I'll like to conclude today's session by talking about the common themes between all these books. Okay. The first one is 100% mental illness and despair. Okay. Every novel that I've discussed today, or all novels that usually touch upon this subject, would talk about mental illness and despair. And recently I've been reading these books. I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat Tteokbokki, and I Want to Die, but I still want to eat tteokbokki, which is like conversations with the psychiatrist of Bake Sahi. And it actually captures a lot of feelings you might have felt about existentialism in general as well. So you can read this book. These are very much guiding and they're not depressing at all. Okay. So in Beljar, of course, Esther descends into a deep depression, then her feeling of being trapped in the Beljar. Okay. In Norwegian Wood, of course, Naoko is in an extremely fragile mental state. And also, there's another character in this. Why am I? Is her name Mizumi, the second female character? Can anyone please confirm with me what is the name of the second girl? The girl who's full of life and much more vibrant. Midori, sorry. Midori. Midori is like if Toru is the guy, Naoko is very, very depressive, and Midori is very, very full of life despite everything. Okay, Midori also has a sad story in general, but I think that really captures that they have chosen how they want to be somewhat. They have chosen to choose life, choose happiness, choose to be happy despite everything. And Midori is an absolute badass character in the book. Okay. I think the time that I read the book, I was more sad. So I liked Naoko more. But now that I have moved on from the book, I 100% think Midori is the one I would want to live like. Okay. Midori is crazy and she wants to be crazy. She wants to be madly loved. She wants to have a crazy love in her life. She wants to have everything. And she's not shy to ask for it. She asks Toru very verbally that I want this. Don't hurt me no matter what. I've been so hurt. Don't hurt me. I just want to be loved. I want to be so full of love. I want to be crazily loved. Okay. There's a very nice example that she gives. She wants a shortcake, and the guy she asks the shortcake from should go immediately and get it for her. And when he gets it to her, she'll throw it away. And and then the guy should be like, oh, of course I should have known that you wouldn't like the shortcake, and the guy should apologize to her. Now if you take it at face value, it of course does not make sense. It sounds stupid, but honestly it's not about the shortcake. It's about the fact that somebody being so madly in love with you that they love you no matter how you are. They love you and they listen to every whim of yours. That's like the expectation to be madly loved. Now whether that's realistic or not is a discussion for another day. But yeah, matlab, it's such a beautiful allegory to what women look for in love. Okay. And yeah, I loved Midori's character. So Toru is kind of torn between Midori and Naoko. He loves them both somewhat. Okay. Naoko is his past, Midori is future. So similarly, right, if you're in a depressive state, you also feel both of those things. It's not like you feel one thing or the another. You sometimes feel both at the same time. So that's something that is very interesting to look at. Second theme is isolation and alienation. Okay. Beljar mein Esther is very disconnected from everyone. She doesn't understand the society, what it expects out of her. Okay. In Posthuma's book, the What I'd Rather Not Think About, both the main characters feel very isolated from everyone, but the brother more than anyone. Okay. Um, Norwegian would, of course, they feel very isolated after the death of their friend. Veronica decides to die. Yeah, she initially does feel that, but when she is in the asylum or the institution, she finds people like her. And actually, something I forgot to mention is that a lot of the dialogue in Veronica Decides to Die is about what it means to be sane or what it means to be insane, what is normal, what is crazy. And when a lot of people, they mention in this book, a lot of people, once they come into the institution, they want to stay there because they find more people who understand them because they're all collectively called insane, right? And there's a lot of like philosophical questions, like in any Coelho book. What does it mean to be insane? Okay, so there's an example, right? The doctor says that I'm wearing a tie, and not just because a collective group of people have decided to call it a tie, it's called normal. But if somebody comes and tells me this is a piece of cloth, colorful clothes tied around your neck that makes you feel choked, it's still right. Okay, but we'll call them insane. It's just a tie. Why can't you just call it a tie? Okay. All right. Thank you, Prachi. I'll send notes. Don't worry. Um, okay, so definitely that is a recurrent feeling, that isolation. And virgin suicides, of course. I think the parents of the sisters are definitely the characters driving them to isolation, but also the society, right? These girls are always looked at like there's some exotic being. Everyone is fantasizing about her or about them or sexualizing them, or the families don't want them to go out much or want to control their sexualities. And that definitely makes them feel very isolated and alienated despite all of them being in the same house. Okay. Um, the next one is probably societal expectations and repression of your feelings. Okay. And I think Veronica Decides to Die has definitely an NSFW chapter on this that I don't want to talk about. But uh, let's just say that there's a scene that I would never be found reading online or offline for that matter. Uh, search for meaning of life. That's again a very common thread in these novels. All these characters in this novel are looking for a meaning in life because they feel life is so monotonous, or they want to just stop because they are so exhausted of looking for it. Okay. And one part that I particularly really liked was from Veronica Decides to Die. It's the moment that Veronica realizes that her attempt at suicide has not been successful and she has to go on living. And I really like the way she thinks. Okay. And the entire life she has before herself, it kind of spreads out before her. And the way she writes it in a matter of fact way, I really liked it. I'm alive, thought Veronica. Everything's going to start all over again. I'll have to stay in here for a while until they realize that I'm perfectly normal. Then they'll let me out and I'll see the streets of Ljubljana again. Its main square, the bridges, the people going to and from work. Since people always tend to help others just so that they can feel they are better than they really are, they'll give me my job back at the library. In time, I'll start frequenting the same bars and same nightclubs. I'll talk to my friends about the injustices and problems of the world. I'll go to the movies. I'll walk around the lake. Since I only took sleeping pills, I'm not disfigured in any way. I'm still young, pretty intelligent. I won't have any difficulty getting a boyfriend. I never did. Make love with them in their houses in the woods. I'll feel a certain degree of pleasure, but the moment I reach orgasm, the feeling of emptiness will return. We won't have much to talk about, and both he and I will know it. This time, the time will come to make our excuses. It's late, or I have to get up early tomorrow, and we'll part as quickly as possible, avoiding looking each other in the eye. I'll go back to my rented room in the convent. I'll try to read a book, turn on the TV to see the same old programs, set the alarm clock to wake up exactly at the same time I woke up the day before, and mechanically repeat all my tasks at the library. I'll eat a sandwich in the park opposite the theater, sitting on the same bench along with other people who also choose the same benches on which to sit and have their lunch, people who have all the same vacant look, but pretend to be pondering extremely important matters. Just the way she writes everything. Like, if you think about things in that way, actually, they seem very depressing and monotonous. My mother, who must be out of her mind with worry about over my suicide attempt, will recover from the shock and will keep asking me what I'm going to do with my life, why I'm not the same as everyone else. Things aren't really as complicated as I think they are. Look at me, for example. I've been married to your father for years and I've tried you to give the best possible upbringing and set you the best possible example. One day I'll get tired of hearing her constantly repeating the same things, and to please her, I'll marry a man whom I oblige myself to love. He and I will end up finding a way of dreaming of a future together. A house in the country, children, our children's future. Will make love often in the first year, less in the second, and after the third year, people perhaps think about sex only once every 2 weeks and transform that thought into action only once a month. Even worse, we'll barely talk. I'll force myself to accept the situation and I'll wonder what's wrong with me because he no longer takes any interest in me, ignores me, and does nothing but talk about his friends as if they were his real world. When the marriage is just about to fall apart, I'll get pregnant. We'll have a child, feel closer to each other for a while, and then the situation will go back to what it was. I'll begin to put on weight like the nurse, that nurse was talking about yesterday. Or was it days ago? I don't really know. And I'll start to go on diets, systematically defeated each day, each week by the weight that keeps creeping, regardless of the controls put on it. At that point, I'll take those magic pills that stop you from feeling depressed. I'll have few more children conceived during nights of love that pass all too quickly. I'll tell everyone that the children are my reason for living, when in reality my life is the reason for living. People will always consider us a happy couple, and no one will know how much solitude, bitterness, and resignation lies beneath the surface happiness. Until one day, my husband takes a lover for the first time, and I will perhaps kick up a fuss like the nurse's aunt, or think again of killing myself. By then, though, I'll be too old and cowardly with two or three children who need my help. I'll have to bring them up and help them find a place in the world before I can just abandon everything. I won't commit suicide. I'll make a scene. I'll threaten to leave and take the children with me. Like all men, my husband will back down. He'll tell me he loves me and that it won't happen again. It won't even occur to him that if I really did decide to leave, my only option would be to go back to my parents' house and stay there for the rest of my life. Forced to listen to my mother going on and on all day about how I lost my one opportunity for being happy, that he was a wonderful husband despite his I cannot pronounce this word, that my children will be traumatized by the separation. 2 or 3 years later, another woman will appear in his life. I'll find out because I saw them or because someone told me. But this time I'll pretend I don't know. I used all my energy fighting against that lover. I've no energy left. It's best to accept life as it really is and not as I imagined it to be. He will continue to be a considerate husband. I'll continue working at the library, eating my sandwiches in the square opposite the theater, reading books I never quite managed to finish. Except that I'll eat my sandwiches with a sense of guilt because I'm getting fatter. I won't go to bars anymore because I have a husband expecting me to come home and look after the children. After that, it's a matter of waiting for the children to grow up and of spending all day without thinking about suicide, without the courage to do anything about it. One fine day, I'll reach the conclusion that that's what life is like. There's no point worrying about it. Nothing will change, and I'll accept it. Oh, this is the beginning of the novel. So, of course, this outlook is very, very depressing. This outlook really changes at the end of this novel, which is I really liked it. But the way it captured the horrifying thing about marriage, my God, made me shiver. Hopefully, married life is not like that, is it? Married people in the house? Anyone thinking about a divorce yet? Hope not. But okay, that was a very intense para to read. And I really liked it. I remember I was cooking something while reading this. And I was like, should I keep cooking? Because, of course, I was making a sandwich at that. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, uh, it's about the outlook, right? Like, I really want everyone here to read Veronica Decides to Die, if not any other book, because I think this was definitely my favorite amongst all the books I have read in this entire lot. Okay, all the books are great in their own ways, but I think Veronica Decides to Die was my favorite. I'd love to know which ones were yours. And yes, thank you so much for being a part of today's session. I'll stop recording, but let's keep the conversation on. And yeah, I'll see you guys also in the next book club session.